Hello and welcome
to Heroes Palace in our very first video.
In today's video, we will be talking about the differences between the comics and the movies of the MCU, or better known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
And of course we can't discuss every movie in one video, so we'll be making a series of these videos.
So for this series, we wanted to focus on Phase 1 of the MCU,
which is Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Incredible Hulk, Captain America, Thor, and the Avengers.
So for the first video, we'll just discuss Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and the Incredible Hulk.
So let's jump right into it with Iron Man 1. Alright, since Iron Man 1 is the very first movie of the MCU Universe series, I would like to talk about the comic first. Because the first time Iron Man appears is in Tales of Suspense Volume 1 in issue 39 in 1962, which featured Tony Stark as Iron Man, Professor Jensen, and Wong Chu of the Ten Rings. Now basically, just a quick synopsis of the comic book before we get into discussion is Iron Man is Tony Stark, in other words, because he's not Iron Man at this point, but Tony Stark is showing off some new electromagnetic technology to the U.S. military. They're impressed by this said technology, so they contract him to make it. He's escorting this technology through Vietnam, which he trips on a tripwire that causes a landmine to explode, mortally wounds him to the point to where Wong Chu comes along and finds him, captures him, finds out that he's this famous Yankee inventor from America, basically makes him an offer that he'll have surgeons remove the shrapnel from his body if he makes him weapons. But Tony knows that's not possible, so he basically agrees just so he can make the technology that he needs to save his own life. But he makes this technology, the exoskeleton, which he calls the Iron Man suit, to escape. But he ends up fighting Wong Chu, which Wong Chu supposedly dies at the end, and then Iron Man puts on a jacket and a hat, walks into the jungle, and then disappears. And that's basically the end of the comic book in Tales of Suspense. Obadiah Stane is not mentioned until Iron Man 163, where Obadiah basically hires a bunch of assassins to try to take out Tony Stark so he could take over his company. Bunch of stuff happened. Tony ends up leaving Stark Industries, or not Stark Industries, but Stark Industrial at that time, I think it was. And then Obadiah took it over, found some plans, made the Ironmonger suit, because he couldn't find the completed plans that Tony Stark had for the original Iron Man suit. And then Iron Man finds all this out, comes out of hiding, makes this brand new suit called the Silver Centurion, which he uses to foil Obadiah's plans. And then that's the end of that comic book. So we'll get into discussion later, but I'm going to let my friend Tez take it over as far as the movie version goes.
Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr., released in May 2nd, 2008, and tells the story of Tony Stark, a billionaire genius inventor who is kidnapped and forced to build a powerful weapon by his design. But instead of building said weapon, he builds a high-tech suit of armor and escapes. He finally makes it back home, where he finds out that his business partner, Obadiah Stane, is trying to take over, and he was the one that originally had Tony kidnapped. Instead of letting Obadiah use his technology the way that he wants to, he dons on his new and improved suit that he made and becomes Iron Man and goes about saving the world.
Alright, so obviously there are a lot of differences between the comic book and the movie. I'm not really going to sit here and nitpick at every single one of them.
Yeah, we'd be here for hours. Just talk about every single
right.
difference.
I mean, come on now. I mean, that's, and then also I'm just being an a-hole at that too. I mean, as much as I'm a comic book fan and a hero fan and all that combined, I don't see it in my place to sit here and nitpick over every little detail. You know, 'cause we don't know how movies work. We don't know how production works. It could be a lot involved. You know what I'm saying? Like they might have had to cut some details because of production costs. You don't know. So with that being said, we are going to walk over a few of the huge differences that we did notice. One of the first ones that I want to pull out are the locations. In the comic book, it's Vietnam. And then in the movie, it's Afghanistan. Now, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is the time and the dates that these had come out. Because in 1962, you obviously had the Vietnam War going on, the protests for peace, you know, not warring. Also, when the movie came out, you know, we were going through the whole Afghan war. So, I mean, even though there's a big difference, that's probably why they changed the location. The other difference that a lot of people didn't notice is the fact that the technology that Stark invented while he was captured in the movie was the arc reactor. Right?
The miniaturized arc reactor.
Exactly. In the comic book, it's basically a super magnet exoskeleton suit. So basically, it's electromagnetic technology. It's not an arc reactor, so-called. It's just a big magnet that he has made technology around that repels or attracts. But he's rigged it to repel, so it pushes the shrapnel away from his heart while powering the suit like an electromagnetic generator. Now, he doesn't even have weapons on this suit. It's basically an exoskeleton. It's just a chest plate with some arm rigs, a gauntlet, 2 gauntlets, and I think maybe some leg rings. They didn't really specify that in the comic book. But I do know in the comic book when Wong Chu comes in to investigate and he kills Jensen, the professor, not a doctor like in the movie, because it was a doctor that helps him make the arc reactor to, you see what I'm saying? Like the push the, you see what I'm saying? So, you know, Jensen did get killed in both the movie and the comic book. But in the comic book, when he comes in, Iron Man jumps up to the ceiling and uses suction cups that hold on to the ceiling to not get caught.
Genius.
So when Wong Chu notices that Tony's not there, he runs outside to order his men to look for him. Tony then drops out of the ceiling, puts a jacket on and a hat on, so he was able to cover this suit up.
So it couldn't have been that bulky.
Exactly, so no one to find out. And then he walks out there and confronts Wang Chu. That's when they get in a little fight, a little scuffle. His men fires bullets. He uses the electromagnetic technology to repel the bullets away from him so he doesn't get hit with them. And then when he goes to go grab a speaker, Wang Chu, Iron Man uses a, I guess he had oil rigged up in a little hose, and he shoot an oil trail from his gauntlet to a ammunitions bunker. And then uses his other gauntlet, which had a lighter in it or something, or a torch in it, and he uses the torch to light it on fire, blows the bunker up while Wong Chu is running by it and supposedly kills him. Of course, we know that doesn't kill Wong Chu. So,
not that easily.
So there's, I mean, but then in the movie, they go straight into Obadiah, like.
I mean, they go from him being kidnapped by the 10 Rings to you finding out that Obadiah set up the whole thing. Like, how did he even get in contact with the 10 Rings?
Right.
That's kind of weird.
Well, not only that, but like, Obadiah's not even in the first appearance of Iron Man. Obadiah's not even mentioned until Iron Man 163. And he's not even a close friend of Tony Stark's. He's a business partner of his dad.
And he had his own company, didn't he?
Yeah, he had his own company. He was a business partner with his dad. And then when Howard died, he had the bright idea that he was just going to take the company from Howard. So he hired a bunch of assassins to take out Stark which they failed because nobody realized that Tony Stark was Iron Man.
Yeah, because in the comics he doesn't reveal that he's Iron Man to the world.
But for some reason in the first movie we decided, hey, we're going to reveal ourselves. But, you know, because Obadiah didn't know at that point in time. So all the assassins were defeated by Iron Man. So something happens. I can't remember exactly what happens, but something happens in the comic book. Tony Stark, like, gives up his company and goes vagabond. Like, starts just traveling away, like kind of like what Batman did. You know what I mean? Like, just takes off and disappears. Left the company to Obadiah. Obadiah teams up with S.H.I.E.L.D. and starts selling weapons to S.H.I.E.L.D. at that point. And then I think he finds some like leftover plans or schematics of the Iron Man suit, but they weren't completed. So he hires a team of scientists to try to reverse engineer it. So they come up with the Ironmonger suit. And that's where the Ironmonger suit comes from.
Okay.
Which I think in the comic, Tony Stark finds out what Obadiah's up to, comes back from his little, you know, sabbatical or whatever you want to call it, creates a new Silver Centurion suit. And then that's where he goes and stops Obadiah in the comic book. So, like, none of that even happens in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, the movie, they just probably wanted to make it a little bit more relatable to the newer fan base that was coming in.
But that's a lot of detail to cover, too.
It is.
I'm saying that'd been like a 4-hour movie.
Yeah. it definitely would have been.
So, you know, just touch on a few things that we just mentioned. You know, in the comic book, he hadn't created the arc reactor. It was electromagnetic technology. He wasn't calling it the arc reactor at that point in time. I don't think if it was the arc reactor, that's what they meant it for it to be.
No, because the arc reactor was more like it was supposed to be a sustainable source of energy.
And I think later on, I'll have to do some more research, and I think we'll come to that later on in our series when we're doing some more of these videos. But I think later on in the comics, he does invent the arc reactor from this electromagnetic technology.
Okay.
But like I said, I'll have to continue my research to make sure I'm 100% on those facts. But again, the location, the technology, the fact that Jensen was a professor in the comic books, but he was a doctor in the movie.
Right.
And I guess that's best to serve the purpose of the arc reactor.
Yeah.
And for it to be in his chest because in the comic book it wasn't in his chest.
He originally stopped the shrapnel from going to his heart. Originally in the movie, that's what his purpose was. And he was like, he's a doctor, that's why he was able to perform it the way he was. So
and that's why he had it implanted in his chest because he had the doctor there.
Right.
Yeah,
He just happened to be there. Okay.
Yeah, so, and like I said, in the comic book, there was no need for a doctor because it was an exoskeleton suit, which they would need a physicist for something like that, and that's what he was. He was a professor of physics. He was a physicist professor, Jensen, I think it was. The fact that it was Wong Chu of the Ten Rings. I don't even think they mentioned Wong Chu in the movie, do they?
No, they just mentioned the Ten Rings.
They mentioned the Ten Rings, but they don't even show Wong Chu as the kidnapper.
No, the guy they showed, they gave him some other name. Was I think it was.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and then the fact that he comes back and fights Obadiah, like none of that's in the first appearance of Iron Man in the comic book. And then the fact that he tells everybody that he's Iron Man. I mean, literally, Iron Man doesn't even tell anybody till like
years after.
Years! Like, even after Obadiah.
He goes around telling everybody that Iron Man's just his robotic bodyguard. Like, nobody knows Tony Stark's Iron Man.
So, there's so many difference. If y'all find some that we didn't mention,
please let us know.
Please let us know in the comments section.
There's a lot of things. There's just so much to go over and try and.
I've got pages and pages of research notes on this comic book and the movie.
Right, and it's not even it. Like, we still have other things that we want to touch on, but we can't because we haven't gotten there yet.
Right?
Like, we don't want to jump ahead of ourselves. So
and we got so much planned for you guys for these series of movies. Like, we're going to try to touch on as much as we can on each video, on each movie that we touch on these videos. With that being said, the next one we're going to be discussing is Iron Man 2.
Oh Lord.
So, with that being said, we're going to jump into it here in just a minute. So we'll be right back with you. Alright, so for Iron Man 2, we're going to focus on the villain on this movie, which was Whiplash in this movie. So as far as Whiplash is concerned in the comic books, he was first seen in Tales of Suspense number 97, where he was played by Marco Scarlatti. And then Whiplash was played by a female in Marvel Comics Presents number 49 by Leanne Foreman. But the Whiplash that we're going to be using for the movie is the one in Iron Man vs. Whiplash number 1, where Anton Vanko plays Whiplash. So basically, Anton hails from a village in Russia called Vostok. So he lived there with his father, and then someone pretending to be Iron Man, trying to frame Iron Man, shows up the village, destroys the village, kills a bunch of people, including Anton's father, Igor. Now, as the imposter was destroying the village, seeing his father hurt, he goes to reach for a specialized rifle, shoots at the imposter, knocking off a piece of the chest plate. The imposter ends up getting away. Iron Man is later put in prison for those crimes. Well, because Anton thinks that Iron Man or Tony Stark did this, he reverse engineers a suit from the chest plate, making a Whiplash suit. So basically, Whiplashes that are energy based, based off of the technology that he got off of the suit. He then tracks Tony to a prison where he tries to take Stark's and Pepper's life. But Stark, being in prison for a while, had fashioned a suit out of machine parts from machines inside the prison and was able to fight off Anton, who got away. And then later on in the comic, when Tony tracks down the criminal syndicate that framed him in Vostok, Anton happens to be there as well, where he confronts Iron Man, but then finds out that it wasn't Iron Man who destroyed the village, but someone just posing at him in his technology. But in Anton's eyes, that's just as bad because it was his technology. So they continue to fight it out in this building, which later catches on fire, which they both end up having to flee for their safety, which allows Anton to get away. And that's pretty much where the comic book leaves off. He's later, not really, he's later seen walking up to the Red Square at the cathedral in the comic book, but then it ends there. But then Whiplash is used in other areas later on in the comics. Like I said, most Whiplashes end up being backlashes, especially Marco Scarlatti. I think Leanne Foreman actually ended up being a backlash as well. Even the one that was on Death Squad, I think, ended up being a backlash as well. So that does it for the comic book version, but there are some details that we'll discuss later. But I'm going to hand it over to Tez and allow him to give you the movie synopsis for the movie.
So basically, all over the world, the media covers Tony Stark as Iron Man. And then you see this guy, Ivan Vanko, who you find out father worked for Stark Industries, his employee, and his father died. You see him working on an arc reactor, basically, with blueprints all in front of him. So then You also see the Tony Stark is being pressured by the government to sell his suits because they say that one person can't have that much technology without sharing it. Really, the government wants it, and Tony was like, "We ain't about to go there," and he showing them why they shouldn't possess the technology that he built. They obviously didn't like it. So around that time, Stark also learns that he is the palladium core in his arc reactor is slowly poisoning him, and he can't find a replacement. So he's growing more reckless, and he just doesn't care about himself and doing a whole bunch of stupid stuff. So he winds up competing in the Morocco Historic Grand Prix, where Ivan Vanko attacks him with whiplash arms with an arc reactor on his chest. Like, he done already built it. He came to show everybody that Iron Man isn't the only, well, Tony Stark isn't the only person that can possess this type of technology. So, I mean, obviously after a while, Tony defeats him, but then Justin Hammer, who runs Hammer Tech, which is a rival of Stark Industries, basically faked Ivan's death and took him to his own facility to get him to build his own army of Iron Men. Basically, he wanted to upstage Tony Stark, as they all did. At one point, you know, Tony is so far gone that it's him versus Rose, and they get into a little altercation, and Rose, and, you know, they wind up fighting. It's really a stalemate, but Rose winds up taking one of the suits for the U.S. Air Force to get him to, you know, since that's what they want, and he's still technically, you know, part of the government, even though he's Tony's friend. Then Nick Fury makes an appearance in the movie, which basically gives Tony some knowledge and some backstory about Vanko, and ultimately gives him the tools to synthesize a new element to make his palladium problems disappear. And then you have Vanko making an army of robots, unmanned Iron Men basically, to attack Tony Stark at the Expo. And the final battle is basically Tony Stark and Rhodes teaming up together after they had to reboot Rhodes' system because Vanko had already hacked that guy. So after they rebooted the system, he went ahead and teamed up with Iron Man to take care of all of the unmanned crafts that Vanko had created and wind up destroying Vanko in the process. And I mean, that's basically what it was.
Alright, so for the discussion part, obviously the fact that there were multiple whiplashes.
Yeah, I mean,
in the comic book era,
they don't even touch on
any of that.
Yeah. I mean, Whiplash is just a character in name because a lot of people picked up the mantle. Mickey Rourke in the movie, he was their interpretation of Whiplash, and they gave him basically his own story for the purpose of the movie to tie it in. Because I don't think he has his father. Was it the same in the comic book? His father.
In the comic book, his father didn't work for Howard or Tony. His father was basically someone posing as Iron Man. Showed up in Anton's village.
Oh yeah, with the Stark Tech and
with Stark Tech, posing as Iron Man to frame him, and ended up killing Igor, which was Anton's father at the time.
Yeah, so basically for the movie, they just gave him his own backstory to make him kind of unique in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, that's
to make his Whiplash characters kind of stand apart from every other Whiplash.
You would have to think of where he gets, you know what I'm saying? Like in the comic book, how he got the tech, how he got the Stark Tech to build that suit, was that he used a rifle to shoot at the imposter, which hitting the imposter knocked off a piece of the chest piece,
right,
which was a crucial part of the technology.
Gotcha.
So he reverse engineered it from there over the years until he created the Whiplash suit. But in the movie, it was different, right? I think he got the plans from his father, who worked for Howard.
Worked for Howard. Him and his father and Howard worked together and built the arc reactor. But his father tried to sell the plans, so
that's right.
Stark's father caught him and had him deported, and he got killed in the Gulag.
That's right.
He has all the blueprints for the arc reactor and everything. And his whole purpose was like, I'm gonna show you that you're not the only one that can.
He didn't have to reverse engineer shit. He had the
Exactly.
diagrams right there. Also, the funny thing I realize is that in the movie his name is Ivan.
Yeah.
But his dad's name in the movie is Anton.
Yeah.
So that's kind of weird. Like, why would you go that route? I mean, if you're going to make a totally different backstory, then, you know what I'm saying? Like, but his father was Igor. Igor. And then Anton, of course, was his son. Now, so at this point in the storyline, Stark gets arrested and charged with these crimes. Like
he was framed for.
He gets put in prison for the whole frame job. Like they put him in prison. That's how Anton finds him. Anton figures out that he's in prison, and that's how he reveals that he has a whiplash suit. He goes into the prison, kills the guards, tries to kill Tony Stark and Pepper Pot or Penny Pot or whatever. Pepper. And then Tony fashions a crude Iron Man suit out of parts from machines in the prison and is able to fight off Anton somehow. In the comic book, of course, you'd have to read the comic book and see the actual frames to see how it plays out. But so he fights him off. Anton escapes because guards come in and he escapes. And then I think later on, Tony figures out who frames him.
Yeah.
It's a crime syndicate of some sort, and run by, and they name this in the comic book Vladimir Putin.
All right.
Yeah, they actually name him. Yeah, they name drop that name in the book.
Wow.
So it's crazy, but so he finds out. He goes to the syndicate to take him out, and Antov shows up for his final showdown with Iron Man.
Yeah.
But realize that it isn't Iron Man that destroyed his village. But he doesn't care because, as far as he's concerned, it's still Stark tech. So he still holds Tony responsible for it. So
it's your weapons.
Yeah, at this point, he's already gotten the whole whiplash thing going down. So I don't think he's going to give it up. But yeah, like he reverse engineered it in the movie. He had the plans from his father, or no, he had his plans from his father in the movie. He reverse engineered it in the comic book. He tracks Stark to prison, and in the comic book he gets away.
So they don't catch him.
So when they end up fighting at the crime syndicate, the building catches fire from their fight, and eventually the building starts to crumble, and they're forced to flee for their lives. And when they do, Anton ends up getting away. Which later he ends up. Let me check this. I think he ends up getting with a death squad or something like that.
Seeing in the movie, he gets killed.
Oh no, he gets recruited by Max Fury as a member of the Shadow Council's incarnation of the Masters of Evil. And then like he appears again in the Infinity storyline, and then in Squirrel Girl, and then the Masters of Evil, and then the Devil's Reign storyline with Taskmaster. Boy, I'm telling you.
He comes later on. We'll talk about Taskmaster later.
And it's funny because a lot of the whiplashes, Marco Scarlatti, I think he was in the what was it? Tales of Suspense '97. He was the first one. He turns into Backlash.
Yeah, what Whiplash iteration would this be for Iron Man 2? This would be the second version of Whiplash.
Third.
The third version?
Third version, yeah. Antov is the third version, which was Iron Man versus Whiplash #1. So their second one, so the first one was Markov Scarlatti and Tales of Suspense '97, or number 97, which was the old one, 1960 something.
Yeah.
And then Marvel Comics presents number 49, which was a female played Whiplash. It was Leanne Foreman.
Right.
That was her alias, and she played Whiplash. But she ends up turning into Backlash as well, just like the first one. And then Iron Man versus Whiplash #1 is when they introduce Anton. Make off. So, I mean, there's quite a few differences there, but I mean, again, just like the first one, I think it's more for production value.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of it, when they are pitching these ideas and these storylines, they try to go with the one that seems like they can
cut and tuck.
Yeah, they can take the most kind of. I mean, because a lot of these stories just you would have to bounce around from comic to comic just to understand.
I mean, this storyline alone would be a 2-hour
Iron Man 1,
movie.
you know, Obadiah's thing doesn't come until later, so he's just kind of a strange person that you just pluck out of thin air. Hey, we're gonna write him into the movie, you know.
It drew out the movie long because, I mean, the first comic, the first Iron Man comic was just back then. Like the Tales of Suspense was like 2 stories. It was 2 separate comics,
right.
So it wasn't a solo comic. It was a shared comic, I guess you could say.
It was like 2 stories.
Yeah, it was
like
2
Tales
different
from the
stories.
Crypt. You know, a story within story.
Right.
We're gonna take 2 stories in this one episode.
Yeah, like I think some of the Hulk comics, like Submariners, has a couple stories in some of his comic books.
Yeah, they did a lot of team ups.
Yeah, a lot of team ups. So, but they have their own stories separate, their own separate storylines within that comic book, though. So it's kind of interesting when you start chasing it all down and researching it.
Yeah, and figuring out what people decided to use as the source material to come out with these movies. And I mean, like I said, they just take a little bit from here and a little bit from here. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Right. So as of right now, not too many major plot or storyline changes. I mean, a few changes here and there, but as far as Iron Man 1 and 2, I don't see anything major to like really piss people off.
Right. You could definitely tell the tone that they were going with the movies, making Iron Man more comedic and, you know, more
they try to stay with the story. Yeah, they tried to stay with it. As much as they could within the production value.
Right. And I mean, obviously with today's technology, you know, the whole Jarvis AI thing. Because back then he didn't have AI in his helmet.
Exactly. Because these comics, again, like we said in the beginning in Iron Man 1, a lot of these comics that they're basing these movies off of were set in the 1960s.
Yeah, before all of this stuff.
During the wars.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what they were based off of. There was a way for help people to get through what was going on around.
It really was to help cope with the war.
Right.
Yeah.
And a way to generate money also.
Obviously. Disney's obviously taking a liking to that one. But as far as these 2 so far, not too many major plot changes. The next one up is going to be the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll probably stop at that one for this video. And then we're going to do another video with Thor and Captain America, the First Avenger.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do a whole nother video for Avengers because, man, the Avengers is huge, bro.
Yeah, we got to talk about the Avengers.
So much in the Avengers going on. So we're going to stop that for Iron Man 2, and we're going to be right back with the Incredible Hulk.
So the Incredible Hulk, starring Ed Norton, which this is the only time that he played the Incredible Hulk for the MCU. Later down the road is Mark Ruffalo, but we'll touch on that on a different time. That came out in 2011, and basically it was an original story, but they kept true to a lot of facts dealing with the Hulk and how he treated Betty Ross and how the general was after him. I mean, the big difference is Abomination, but I mean, the movie basically, Bruce Banner trying to get rid of the Hulk. He's overseas, somewhere in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, and he's just working at a factory, you know, bottling up some kind of drink, and he's just in his spare time trying to get rid of the Hulk. Same thing he's trying to do in the comics. He's trying to get rid of the Hulk because he doesn't want it inside him anymore. And you know, something happens, his blood gets infused in the drink, somebody dies, and the general pinpoints where he is, General Ross. And they send the military after him. And in the movie, Abomination basically got infused with Bruce's DNA. And that's how he turned into Abomination. But that's not how it happened in the comics.
So, for the comic book version of it, is basically based off the comic book Tales of the Astonished, Volume 190. Which was released in January 10th of 1967. Of course, again, this is back when comic books weren't just single comic books. It wasn't just about one superhero. There were about two. So in this comic book, there were two tales. It was the Mariner, the Submariner, and the Hulk. Now, in this particular issue, for the Hulk's story, was about Abomination and how Abomination can be. So it's basically it's the first appearance of Abomination, and it's like I said, Tales of Astonish number 190. But basically, in the comic book, same thing. Bruce is trying to get rid of the Hulk, and he tries to do this while he's in human form because he knows if he's in the Hulk form, Hulk won't let him do it. So he basically tries to like over bombard his body with gamma radiation. Well, that's his plan anyway. So he's on a U.S. military base. He's getting ready to do this. There's a bunch of stuff that led up to this, but I'm just getting to the main facts here. And the general and Betty, they all find out about this, and they go to stop him from doing it, from killing himself, because basically he's basically committing suicide. He's just trying to rid the world of the Hulk, because he can't control the Hulk, so he wants to get rid of it. Now, at the time this is all going down, there is a U.S. agent who is actually a KGB spy, and he is actually hiding in and watching all this go down. So he is actually in the chamber with Bruce, and Bruce is getting ready to bombard himself with all this gamma radiation, and right before he can start the process, the general and this whole military team sweeps in, grabs Bruce, pulls Bruce out. You know, they talk him out to it, but the machine is still primed, ready to go. Well, the agent, not knowing what was going on, walks over, hits the button, and essentially becomes Abomination in the process. And that's basically how it happens in the comic book. So, like I said, there are a few other differences in that, and we're fixing to get to those right now, but I just wanted to give you the synopsis of the comic book. Alright, so for the discussion part, there wasn't too many differences. They did a really good job of pretty much transferring it over to the movies from the comic book. Like I said, there were only a few differences. Some of the major ones we're going to talk about is obviously the way he becomes Abomination.
Right. I mean, in the movie, he becomes Abomination by getting Banner's blood injected into him by a doctor that Banner sent his blood to help him try to find a cure. But the doctor started doing other experiments. Once he saw what was in the blood, he was like, oh, I got ideas.
Yeah, I got somewhere for this.
Which is also nice to know, even though they haven't paid it off, and I doubt they ever will, but he was supposed to turn into the leader, the doctor, because he got some of Banner's blood on him also,
right?
Which was transforming him into the leader, but they never did anything with that.
Huh.
But wow, that's how Abomination became Abomination in the movie, being injected with Banner's blood.
And was his name Blonsky in the movie?
Yeah, it was Blonsky there. But he worked for the general. He was a U.S. military.
He was an actual agent,
right.
A U.S. military agent.
Right.
So in the comic book, like I was saying, the synopsis, his name was Emil Blonsky.
Okay.
And he was a U.S. agent. He was a KGB agent posing as a military officer. But they didn't even know he was on the base. He was hiding. He was spying, gathering information on Bruce Banner because that's what he was told to do.
Did they tell you who told him to do it?
Just Russia. Russia was trying to find the secrets out.
Right.
So they wanted to know how he became the Hulk, of course, so they sent him to spy on him. Okay. He infiltrated the military, and that's how. But, so Bruce is basically trying to kill himself. Emil happens to be there spying on him, trying to figure out how he became the Hulk.
Yeah.
Doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't even realize that he's in a gamma radiation lab. And then the military comes in and stop Bruce from killing himself because they obviously want the Hulk for military reasons. Even though they can't control him, they still want him. So they don't want him dead. So they try to capture him while he's still in Bruce Banner form.
Yeah.
So when they do, they pull him out of the gamma radiation tank. Well, Blonsky's still in there.
So he gets hit with all of that gamma.
Doesn't realize that the machine's ready to go. goes over there and starts touching buttons.
Yeah.
And it turns into Abomination. Now, in the comic book, because there's two parts to the comic books, because like I said, this is 1960s when they wrote these comic books.
Right.
So they weren't like today, because today's comic book heroes, they have a whole comic book dedicated to themselves.
One it usually has some kind of a story.
Right.
The runs, as they call it.
Yeah. Back then, they couldn't afford to do that because comic books weren't that popular back then. So they basically put two comic books into one issue. Okay. So on this one, it was called Tales of the Astonished, and the first part of the tale was a tale of Submariner, which was another hero in the Marvel Universe. And then the second story was the first appearance of Abomination.
Okay.
Then it goes to issue 92, which is the second part of the story. So the second part of the story, so at the end of issue 90, after he becomes Abomination, he basically goes wild. Bruce turns into the Hulk to try to stop him.
Yeah.
Gets his ass beat.
The Hulk?
Like, yeah, bad.
Oh,
like,
wow.
on death's door bad. Then Abomination scoops up Eddie and then jumps away. Right? Well, in the very next issue, Ross has the Hulk revived. So once the Hulk gets revived, they tell the Hulk what's going on, but Hulk won't want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
You know, he just wants to be left alone.
He already got his ass beat once.
Yeah, right. So before he can go away, another officer by the name of Jones, like, is talking to the Hulk, kind of like Black Widow did in the Avengers, you know what I'm saying? And kind of appealed to the Bruce Banner side of him and got him to calm down, which eventually he turned back into Bruce.
Yeah, so they can reason with him.
Right. So they told Bruce what was going on. Bruce then builds a machine or a device to tempt Abomination back to the Gamma base.
Okay.
So he could have his little final battle with him, right?
Yeah.
And they were going to try to stop him. They were going to try to hit him with the extra gamma rating, try to stop him. Well, he shows up. They get into this huge battle. But Abomination doesn't die. Before Bruce can even do anything, the Stranger decides that Abomination is the ally that he needs, and teleports him out.
I mean, a lot of people thought that Abomination died in the Hulk movie, but you see him later down in the MCU movie, briefly, but
very briefly.
So
very briefly.
I guess it's safe to say that he didn't die, he just got choked the hell out.
Right. So, I mean, not too many differences there. Again, just like Iron Man and Iron Man 2, I think we discussed this earlier, more production value, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think about it. In the times when we were growing up and they were making these comic books, there was no such thing as DNA or cloning or any type of that. I mean, this was like far-fetched ideas. This was fantasy world. You know what I'm saying?
Nobody was really talking about
hitting somebody with gamma radiation and changing them into a big green monster was fantasy to us because, you know, we didn't know any of this.
Exactly.
So it was huge fantasy for us. So I think in the production value of it, it would be really hard to explain the whole gamma thing and how he became like, because how they explained it in the comic book was Bruce's DNA was already in the gamma tank somehow. So while he was getting hit with that, when Blonsky accidentally activated it and he was getting hit with the gamma radiation, instead of killing him, the DNA that was left behind by Bruce Banner and the Hulk that was still in the chamber somehow mixed with his DNA and turned him into a bomb. That's why he became the Abomination. Was because it was a mixture that did something like that.
Right.
You know, I have to like I said, I have to read some of these comic books again. I'm basically pulling all this off of memory, but that's pretty much what happens to him. That's how he becomes the Abomination. So not knowing to him.
Right.
But in the movie,
with the comic books, I mean, because of the time that they were written and everything, people in the world had a sense of what was going on because they were using reference points in real world aspects.
They wanted super soldiers. So, even though it was a far-fetched idea, it was still a topic.
Because they were going through the war.
Yeah, you had this huge regime that had the whole world up in arms trying to figure out how they were going to defeat this regime. And the best way they could figure out was to make comic books.
Yeah, to help people cope. And I mean, nowadays with the technology and the new generation, they know as fans we're going to watch it anyway.
Right.
But they're trying to drag in new people that really don't know what the Marvel universe is all about.
So of course they're going to revamp these characters, make them more modernized to today's times,
to try and relate them to somebody now.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, and we'll get on this when we do the Captain America one, but I kind of like how they did the Captain America. They left him in the old part of the comic book kind of type deal, but brought him towards the modern times with the whole freezing and then coming back.
Yeah.
Like that whole spiel. So I think they kind of worked that out really well as far as getting it from the war part of the comic book side,
right,
and into the movie side of the modern times. But like I said, we'll get more on the Captain America side. But as far as this video, we're going to wrap it up right there at the Incredible Hulk. If y'all have any ideas of any other videos or discussions y'all would like to see us do, please feel free to leave a comment. Hit us up, let us know, man. We'd be glad to do any videos that y'all would like us to do.
And definitely hit that subscribe button and make sure the bell notifications on so you'll be alerted every time we drop a new video.
Because we have a lot of videos planned out for you guys. So this is going to do it for this one. Like I said, in our next video, we're covering Captain America, Thor,
and
is that it? And then we're going to do a third video for
Avengers,
right? Because there's the whole like that's going to be a whole video by itself. Again, thanks for watching this video. We hope y'all liked it. If y'all have any comments, please leave them down in it. Don't be haters. Come on.
Right.
We're just comic book fans.
Want to talk. We just want to talk.
Like I said, this is a place for discussion where people can share their opinions without being knocked down for it, because that's what Heroes Palace is about. So please don't be a troll in our comment section, man. Just enjoy everybody's comments and opinions. Some people like to see fandom. I mean, some people would like to see the comic book versions change and do other things, but that's their opinion. That's what they would like to see it, and they're allowed for that because, I mean, it's fantasy. Come on, baby. None of this shit's real.
Exactly.
So I hope y'all enjoyed the video, man. We're going to bring more for y'all, and we'll be back. Thank you again.